Hello, and thank you for tuning into Answers from the Lab, where we share Mayo Clinic knowledge and advancements on the state of testing and science from laboratory leaders and the people who are making it happen behind the scenes. I'm Dr. Bobbi Pritt, the chair of the Division of Clinical Microbiology in the Department of Laboratory Medicine and Pathology at Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. With me today is Dr. Bill Morice, the chair of the Department of Laboratory Medicine and Pathology at Mayo Clinic and the president of Mayo Clinic Laboratories. This is our weekly discussion with Dr. Morice, in which we learn about updates in the field of laboratory medicine and pathology. Hi, Bill. Welcome back.
Yeah, I hope you had a great Christmas holiday.
I did. How about you?
I did indeed. As you can tell, I'm not in my office. I'm still in northern Minnesota experiencing true winter up here. But yeah, I had a great holiday.
Yeah, it looks lovely. We also had a really safe, relaxing time, just the two of us. I hope that all of our listeners had a good holiday season as well. Maybe got to safely see some friends and family.
Exactly. Yeah. Hopefully people had time to enjoy, we had found ways to connect. We had to be creative again, probably more than we expected. If you were traveling, apparently travel was quite the adventure here or misadventure for a lot of people. So, but I think and now it's kind of that week in between Christmas and New Year's, and it's always a time typically slower for work and time people reflect. And I think now this year, probably more than most, there's a lot for us to reflect on. Probably personally for everybody, but in healthcare too, because there's a lot that we've learned now as we've been dealing with this for going on 2 years.
I was thinking the same thing. This is the time that we start reflecting on what we're going to see in the new year. Of course, we don't have our crystal ball. We can't predict, but we can look back and reflect on really almost 2 years of the pandemic and what we've learned during that time. We have tools in our toolbox now that we didn't have. I'll say that I've been thinking about just some of the incredible accomplishments that we've made. If you think about the fact that we came up with under pressure, the whole world came together and developed highly effective vaccines, new drugs. When you hear them on the news, we now have drugs that can be used for people to help that prevent them from bad outcomes and being hospitalized, new tests, new specimens. We've really learned a lot.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a time of great stress, but a time of great innovation and teamwork at the same time, to your point. And I think that we did learn that there is a lot of resilience in healthcare, in the healthcare system, and that includes those who support healthcare through technologies. And when you think about the manufacture of ventilators, for instance, and that is something we didn't even talk about, or the transformation of hospital rooms to have a higher acuity of care, or the kind of the managing people at home and home healthcare, which is something that these are all things, maybe not the manufacture of ventilators, but the home healthcare and the different ways to manage patients in a hospital, and having more flexible facilities and infrastructure to do that are all things that we had seen coming into the pandemic. But our ability to accelerate that in a time of crisis has been really remarkable, I think.
I agree. The resiliency and the innovation, as you said, we're already looking into things like deploying telehealth more broadly, but now look at how broadly it's been deployed successfully, working remotely, things that we talked about in the past. Now working remotely is in a lot of people's careers and schedules. Also, some of the new things I've seen from the lab standpoint, getting your own tests through the FDA under emergency use authorization. Labs typically hadn't worked closely with the FDA to get their lab developed tests with this special emergency use authorization. A lot of labs did that during the pandemic in the United States. And then looking at new specimens like saliva, not something we typically did for respiratory virus detection, or looking for ways to save on reagents, such as pooling specimens. These were things that we all did and learned a lot from in the process. And I think we're going to see a lot of these stick around to varying extents.
Yeah, and I think that, that's kind of one of the things that I think is really significant about healthcare. As you said, a lot of these ideas were on the shelf pre-COVID, right? And COVID really forced us, if you will, and so from an optimistic way, could you say, provide the opportunity for us to bring these down, because one of the reasons that there's a lot of reasons why in healthcare the ideas tend to sit on the shelf, so to speak. And part of it's because of the regulatory process around this, which you mentioned, there was more flexibility there, more dynamic between labs and regulators on how to do that. And also just societal expectations on healthcare. You know, we pre-pandemic in particular, but as you and I were training, and particularly me, you know, I went to med school in the late 80s and early 90s. There was a very concrete a sort of stereotype view of how you interacted with the provider, with the physician. You went into the office, those sorts of things. I think coming out of this, two of the things that are really going to change in healthcare are this whole expectation of mobility. I mean, that whole going to your doctor, typically oftentimes people move to a place specifically because they knew they could get good healthcare. I think back to when Rochester was ranked as one of the top 10 cities in the country to live in. Part of that was because Mayo Clinic is there, a big part of it, and you had good healthcare. Well, that's going to change as people move around, how they interact with healthcare, virtual care, having their portability of their health record. So wherever they show up, anyone knows what's going on with that individual. I think these are things that are going to really change. The other thing that I think is really going to change is this whole acceleration of platform, you know, where rather than having a very, what we call linear supply chain, where, you know, something is produced, you go to someone who has it to get it, in this case, healthcare, versus platform where you create virtual environments where producers and consumers come together. I think we're going to, you know, we had started that direction, of course, with Dr. Ferrugia's leadership, a big part of 2030, but I really think that's going to accelerate as well, because that kind of goes hand in hand with this mobility is people wanting, to your point, they have different expectations of how they can get a test, where they can get a test, how that information goes back to them, where they can take that information to get more information or interpretation. These, I think, are things that are going to be really exciting because I think it'll improve access to healthcare. I think it'll be a positive, but also be really challenging because it means that for those of us in healthcare, the kind of conveyor belt and acceleration of change is just beginning.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot for us to think about and make sure that we're still a part of it as we go forward with all of these things. But I agree, like the platform idea of being able to just go and find what tests are available, and they might be by multiple different healthcare providers. That's something that we've seen pop up, and it's been widely used, especially folks that have been traveling for the holidays. They want to get a test. Some states have systems where they can just go on, you can find out where your local testing system is. I think also virtual consults. I've actually participated in one of these myself, and it never would have crossed my mind to call up a doctor's office and say, oh, is this doctor doing virtual consults? Because I don't want to drive to wherever this person is. That really changes how we could see physicians around the country. You could see a world famous physician in another state, and you don't necessarily have to go there. You could start off with a virtual consult. I think patients appreciate that convenience, and it's going to improve access to care.
Yeah, I agree. I think one area and near dear to my heart, because my parents were both psychologists, but is in mental health. I mean, one thing we have seen is actually, because there's also there's a stigma, you know, that some people associate with going to which is horrible. It should not be that way, but it's just societal. So now we're seeing increased access, and people that live in areas without much psychiatric and psychological support and care, we're seeing those things. And so it is, I think it's really exciting. I think for us, it really goes back to our last conversation, or maybe two conversations ago with Dr. Karen, talking about, you know, all that's happening with the at-home testing. And as you were speaking, I think it's an exciting time for us because the technologies will change and expand, but the core knowledge about how they're used to take care of people is still what's really going to be needed to be infused in that system. And this will give all of us new opportunities and new ways to do that, new ways to take our knowledge and help make sure that the things people are getting are safe and accurate, and also how to codify that knowledge so it's more accessible to people. So I think it's going to be a tumultuous time for all of us, because it's sooner or later we'll get through COVID, but then our work will just really still be ramping up. But it's going to be extremely exciting, especially for all of us, especially people coming into healthcare now. I think there'll be new focus on diagnostics, new opportunities in laboratory medicine, digital pathology, all those sorts of things. So I think it's going to be an extremely exciting time.
I agree, Bill. I think it's things that people need, and it's access to care that people are going to want. They are now getting used to the fact that you can go to your local drugstore and get a test, a point of care test, like we talked about with Dr. Karen. And I think that is going to continue, and we will hopefully continue to see well thought out, well designed tests that are made available. And we're going to have to continue to think about what role we play in laboratory medicine in helping to guide the use of these tests. I think there'll always be a role for extremely high quality, high sensitivity, high specificity lab performed tests, but I think it's a given that we're going to see some of these rapid point of care tests that people can perform in their own home as well. And we're going to have to think about how those all play together.
Yeah, I think in the ideal state, it actually goes back to that Dr. Will Mayo vision of I think he called it the cosmopolitan system of medicine. I mean, the challenge that we have in healthcare today, and even with COVID, as it's accentuated really with COVID, is that the way the healthcare works, generally speaking, is that you wait until you get sick. And then once you're really sick, you go to a doctor and seek care. Now, if we have a lot more information disseminated and in people's hands, the hope is that you won't have to wait till you're really sick to get a meaningful interaction with a physician or care provider that will help you with your health and wellness and well-being. So you're right, the hospitals, there'll still be surgeries, there'll still be clinical labs, there'll still be all of those things, but they'll be part of a system which is designed more and more around the needs of individual people, which is great. I mean, that's of course back to us and Mayo, and the needs of the patient come first. And we're not the only healthcare organization that has that mission. We all do, right? So it'll be new opportunities for healthcare to really better serve people, and lots for us to talk about. So, yes, and it won't just be absolutely. COVID. I mean, thank God.
Thank goodness. I know. I think we're all getting sick of hearing about COVID. We'll keep talking about it and what we need to know. But yeah, it's exciting that we have a lot of other things to keep talking about.
Indeed. And I look forward to it. And I wish you a very happy new year and joyful and prosperous 2022.
You too, Bill. And wishing that to all of our listeners and viewers as well out there. Hope you all stay safe and have a wonderful new year.
Absolutely. Everybody stay safe, enjoy, and happy new year.
Thank you so much for tuning in to Answers from the Lab. Be sure to subscribe to this podcast and don't forget to tune in every Thursday and every other Tuesday.